we're on the verge of a civil war.
When do you predict this happens?
I'm going to say next. They said the Middle Ages was this period of barbarity and savagery. It's a fantasy that Protestants and atheists developed afterwards to make Catholicism look bad. I am a level 12 battle mage. The Pope said, if you sack Rome, God will destroy you. Attila pulled away, he didn't attack Rome. From the European perspective, they discovered this land and conquered it. From the native perspective, this is them playing a board game of War of the Worlds. They put 9 mice into a cage, perfect conditions. The mouse population got to 2,000. Female mice became masculine. Male mice became effeminate. The mouse birth rate collapsed to 0. Every single thing in Mouse Utopia has already happened.
Whoa, where does that leave us?
Here. Yo, Duke, I burned down your castle. I hope for your peeps wasn't too much of a hassle.
Yes, I knew you would have one.
Maybe explain to me how you got started in this. Like, you are such a breadth and like just a wealth of knowledge. How did you get started in this? How did you grow the channel? I'm just very, very curious.
Thank you. You're very kind. I started this channel a decade ago on my 13th birthday, largely out of boredom, where I was in a thing called alternate history. Like, what if the Nazis won the Civil War? What if the South won World War II?
Oh,
And
interesting.
I did that for 7 years, and for the first 5 years, I only had 500 subscribers. Then there was a comment that told me I sucked and told me I needed to improve 5 different things. Then I did it, and I got it from 500 to 50,000.
Literally off of a comment.
So the comment said, "Kid, you suck," and it gave me all the reasons the channel was terrible. And I thought, this hurts, but every single thing he said is accurate, so I'm going to do it. Then. Wow. I switched out from alternate history after 7 years. It must have been 6 or 5, whatever. After many years, I switched out from alternate history to the current content, which I was explaining at the beginning. I call it human nature content because it's history, anthropology, philosophy, culture, all of those things. And so I've been doing that for the last 5 years, last 5 years, and so I cover topics. I'm best known for my prediction that America's on the verge of a civil war now, but I also talk about civilizations. I talk about the intersection between biology and history, a bunch of different things.
Super interesting. I think the first thing is, like, it stands out to me, dude, that comment, like you said, like, it hurts so bad to get a comment like that. And then very few people, though, will actually look at that and take, hey, there's something constructive here that I can go change. And you took that, and it was kind of like a blessing in disguise in a weird way. Like, you took it, and all of a sudden you started growing quickly.
The difference between strength and weakness is that when a strong person faces an issue, they use it to improve, and for a weak person, they cave. So you look at the Jews, and I just recently released a video on Jewish civilization. The way the Jews got so successful, at least I'm going to briefly say this, knowing there's thousands of years of context I'm leaving out, is that the Jews had a religious structure that whenever something bad happened, they reflected how this related to their interaction with the will of God. And if you're an atheist, you can understand the will of God as just the way the world works. So if you want to look at the Bible, they'll say stuff, or any religious document, they'll say you should engage in certain behaviors because it's God's will. And people think, oh, big man in the sky. No, it's the emergent phenomena that is the world. So if you don't follow these rules, the world's going to punish you. So the Jews built a system where they would interact with the world, learn what they did wrong, adjust, and then that became the Abrahamic tradition, while all of the other religions of that region of the world died out.
And there's some parallels to, like, Stoicism on that as well, I think.
Oh,
as far as, like, what cultures have you studied the most? Like, you have all these videos, hundreds and hundreds at this point, right? What cultures, what time periods are you most fascinated by?
So the culture I've studied the most is Anglo-American, because that's the culture I'm a part of. But my favorite era of history is the Middle Ages. I've studied, if you want to ask anything to me, ask me about how medieval people perceive the world, because it's a complete different rabbit hole and different perception of reality. I'm also really into the period around the fall of Rome, and I'm really into early America.
So, okay, I'm very fascinated by this. So I talk a lot about, the technology of today. We've talked about AI a bit. We've talked about social media. I talk about that a lot, and how I don't think that it's all good. There's some really powerful and great tools that we can utilize, but that also comes with a cost. It comes with a debt to be paid from our human, just emotional ability and just, ability to live life as a human, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the what are some of the differences in the way medieval, people would be living their life versus what we live life now? What are some of the pros and cons and just the ways to navigate it?
Yeah. So first of all, our perception of the Middle Ages has very little to actually do with the Middle Ages. It's a fantasy that Protestants and atheists developed afterwards to make Catholicism look bad. And I'm Protestant, so I'm not going to say I'm Protestant, so I bear some. Actually, no, I've been really nice to the Middle Ages. I do not bear cultural responsibility for this. But Protestants and atheists who wanted to make the Catholic Church look primitive, they said the Middle Ages was this period of barbarity and savagery and just primitiveness. Well, the reality is medieval Europe was one of the most advanced societies in the world up to its time. I mean, it made modern Europe. If you made modern Europe, which conquered the world and did science and did the Industrial Revolution, you did something right. And so medieval culture, they invented the scientific method. They invented the tools of modern logic. They had a stock market system. There was philosophic atheism in the universities. They had advanced mechanics and gear work. So it's not a primitive society, not at all. And for how medieval people perceive the world versus us today, as an example, medieval people saw the human mind as an ecosystem. So the reason that they would burn heretics or witches is they thought they were terrorists against the collective social structure, where they called the church knights or warriors of the spirit, because they saw the church as protectors against demonic possession. And if you took a medieval person today, they would say we're completely demonically possessed as a society, because their concept of demon is bad psychological force that seizes control of you. So the role of the church was to keep societies from going crazy or from just losing touch of reality. So their concept was that you would imbibe different spirits or different magical protections into your psyche as a sort of psychological immune system. So their idea was that, in their role of the church was this organization where people would siphon psychic energy from as a way to protect Europe from demonic possession. And they had a highly complex system. That's one of the things you wrote out, where they had an entire frame of reality. They had laws of physics based around this stuff. They had a complex series of angels and demons, and Dante's Inferno is the real... Dante's Inferno is the real example of that. It's the culmination of that entire culture.
That's so fascinating. And so when you're referring in this period in time, the church, it would be Catholicism.
Oh, of course.
Right.
Protestantism didn't exist yet.
Yeah. So, I mean, where do you think, what are your thoughts on that? So you said you're Protestant, but then this theory is a little bit different. So I'm just kind of curious,
So,
where does that all go? Where does that take you?
My dad's Catholic, and my dad's the person who's had the biggest impact on how I've developed the world. So I've ended up with a fairly pro-Catholic frame. I've spoken to religious friends, and they'll say, you espouse a lot of ostensibly Catholic ideas without perceiving them as Catholic. I have a pretty positive impression of the Catholic Church, all things considered. I think they've been done dirty by history, but if an organization can last for over 2,000 years and not degenerate into complete moral corruption, they did something right. And also, the Catholic Church was responsible for the creation of modern science and modern logic, where the Reddit atheists don't understand that modern science is dependent on Christianity, and that the founders of modern science were mostly monks. Roger Bacon, William of Ockham, all of the founders of the scientific method, all those things, they were Catholic monks in the Middle Ages. The other thing as well, Thomas Aquinas, he got the laws of physics from alchemy. And so there's not this distinction between science and religion. They operate in two different spheres, but they've been marketed as if they're fundamentally at odds.
Why do you think that is?
So the reason people don't think science and religion should work together is that the church and secular authorities took on oppositional attitudes towards each other due to their shared self-interests, where partly it's that you got very literal interpretations of the Bible due to the Protestant Reformation, where the fathers of the Catholic Church said you should read the book of Genesis, which has all the more it has more of the symbolic. It has more stuff like Noah bringing all the world's animals onto an ark, or God making the world in 7 days. And the fathers of the church said you should read those stories as myths or symbols, not as literally. The Protestants demanded a literal interpretation of the Bible for complex reasons. So you ended up with this highly autistic and highly hair-splitting fights over theology that missed the underlying soul of it. And there was a huge intellectual shift, which I discovered, that occurred in the 17th century, that split science, religion, and all those different things. And it's called the Descartes-Spinoza-Kant axis.
What is that?
So Descartes-Spinoza-Kant axis is that you should not look at physical reality, or it's complicated to articulate, where all of those thinkers agree that you should use rational principles like mathematics to understand the world. The problem with that is that it allows complete deviation from reality. And so one of my favorite religious authors, Houston Smith, he says science is like a searchlight, where science works because, and science itself is just a test. I am very pro-science, although I'm also religious, because science is a way of measuring. We're going to make a test. One of these two results will prove a certain thesis. So we're going to run the test, and then based off which result works, it'll prove or disprove a thesis. And that's a single test. The founders of science were almost all religious, and they never thought that science would become our entire worldview. It's just a testing mechanism. But what happened is that due to the breakthroughs that occurred from this, the proponents of science made the argument that we are the entire world. And they never really articulated why that was the case. It was just assumed as true, that all true information comes from science. But I don't think you can shove reality through one testing mechanism. I just don't think that's how the human condition exists.
Yeah, there's things that we can't, there's things that literally cannot be explained, yet
Yes.
they are still real. And so maybe talk to me about your viewpoint on this. Like, do you feel like people today, much more than even like the medieval times or whatever, do you feel like people today really feel that way? Like they have to see it to believe it?
So,
Or do you think faith is dying out?
this is something I've been working on, where religion's been in a precipitous decline for the last 500 years. And in America, we were 90% Christian about a generation ago. Then the numbers went in nosedive in the 21st century.
Well, you said 90%. How long ago?
A generation ago, like 1980.
And now
We're at like 60+%. So it's been a huge crash. And it's mostly due to the spiritual but not religious people.
And is this Christianity specifically or just religion in general?
So Christianity specifically has collapsed. Every major world religion's been in a complete nosedive over the 21st century. So America's a more religious country than Iran is now.
Interesting. And so you think all of it, no matter which religion we're talking about, all of the decline is due to what?
I don't want to get into the Mouse Utopia rant now. I blame Mouse Utopia.
What is that?
Okay, we're going here. So,
Can I ask that?
yeah, it's your freaking show, man.
I'm freaking learning so much that I'm excited to learn about
Mouse Utopia is one of my best known videos, and they put 9 mice into a cage that can hold 2,000 mice. And so they ran this experiment 30 times in the 60s and 70s, and it was about overpopulation. And every single time they put mice in perfect conditions, no predators, no disease, nothing, the mouse population got to 2,000 out of the 6,000 that the pen could hold. Then each time, the mouse birth rate collapsed to 0, female mice became masculine, male mice became effeminate, you saw a breakdown of mice's ability to have social connections, you saw a breakdown of the mouse social structure, and you saw sociopath mice murder people, and autistic mice arise who have no social understanding. And so the mouse colony failed each time, and the realization of Mouse Utopia was one of the most horrifying things that happened in my life, because every single thing in Mouse Utopia has already happened.
Whoa. Crazy. Where does that leave us?
Here. So
I'm not often found without words. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Like I kind of, so here's a different perspective. I think that at least when in our circles that I'm in, which is just a small group, I'm starting to see, and other people are agreeing with me, that like there is, at least in the Christianity standpoint, there is a recent resurgence in faith.
agreed.
And I think it has to do with the fact that, I don't want to say like people are being red pilled. I'm not trying to say that, but there's like there's this idea that like not everything is what it seems. And we've been lied to about a lot of things for multiple decades now.
Yes.
And people are starting to realize that and wake up to that. And I think in a weird way, the more conspiracy type stuff people are starting to be exposed to, that is really not conspiracy if you ask some people, I think it opens the door to like, there are things that are not explainable. And the best explanation is that there is God.
Yes.
And that God is actually very real. What are your thoughts on just that entire concept?
There's multiple curves going on there. So the demographic which consistently believes in God or spirituality and those things the least is the managerial class. So when polled, most Americans believe in God, ghosts, psychics, and like other stuff like that, and the validity of or the Bible. So
like the spiritual realm in general, like that there is a physical realm and a spiritual realm, and we just can't see it.
There has never been a point where a majority of Americans did not believe in those concepts. What happened is that the managerial class made them taboo to discuss. And so you're looking at a kind of weird thing where the general public has views that cannot be aired in the public discourse. So the general public, like I think aliens are a manifestation of some human desire, some innate human biological spiritual principle. If people 2,000 years ago saw fairies and dragons and dryads in the sky, we can see UFOs. So I think we have lots of different things that try to reach this general public appetite that isn't being met by the public discourse, but
like things that are like people that are like they believe a certain thing, like I believe in ghosts or whatever, I believe in that there's a spiritual realm, I believe in angels, or I believe in just you name it, something that's spiritual, not physical. They'll believe in it, but it's just like taboo to discuss it out loud. Like it's no longer culturally acceptable to discuss those things because that's a little far out. But then if you got that person with a gun to their head or in a really weird position, like, and they're like, what am I supposed to do with this? They're going to say, no, I believe that.
It's one of those things like if you're a university professor, you might talk to your friends about it, but you'd never make a dissertation about it.
Because people would write you off as like a crazy?
A crank, yeah. And
is that the same as what it was like ages ago? Like what's that like compared to centuries ago?
That taboo was very recent. So until World War I, the most educated people in the Western world were obsessed with spirits and ghosts. Thomas Edison tried to make a machine to talk to ghosts. Nikola Tesla did as well. Queen Victoria was into this stuff. Same thing. You could throw a dart at any educated, preeminent figure around the time of Sigmund Freud too, around the time of World War I, and they were accepted ideas. I like to say the world wars were an event of cultural significance equivalent to the foundation of a new religion or civilization. So we went through this huge social shift around World War I that this was boxed in with, where you saw after World War I, and really more so over that next generation until the 60s, you saw it taboo to discuss philosophic materialism, or the only things you can touch exist. You can't talk about spiritual concepts. Gender equality became normalized in the public discourse, or the idea that men and women are exactly the same. The blank slate, or the idea that human nature is innately malleable, that was broken. There's the concept that progress is innate, that really got entrenched. And the video I just finished writing is called "The Rise and Fall of the Blue Pill," because I agree with you that a lot of younger guys have been red-pilled, because I don't know how it's possible to be a young guy and not get red-pilled. It's just the nature of life these days. And so I talk about, and the interesting thing is that religiosity is on the increase in Gen Z, where for the first time now, a majority of college-age women are right-wing. And for young men, the number's rising much faster. So youngest cohort of Gen Z is right-leaning, older Gen Z is left-leaning, millennials more so, and there is this cultural group that's forming that's going to end up becoming a counterweight to the left.
Very interesting. And I think a lot of times people like on the whole age, category and like value to society and all this, I think a lot of people like to believe that people that are in their 20s or young people, like people 18 to 20, 18 to 30 even, like 35, whatever, are like, okay, just learning and just kind of like kids and just like whatever, and like to discount the value of what they can bring. But then you look back on history, most stuff happens because of a bunch of ambitious young people trying to go out and make something happen. Like founding fathers, a lot of them were very young. I don't know if I'm right or wrong on
you're
that
right,
100%, but my understanding is that most of them were young.
Yeah, Joan of Arc, Alexander the Great, Augustus, these were all really young people. Napoleon was 24 when he became a general, and he was 29 when he took power. So a lot of it, and Gen Z is a difficult generation to understand because I think we're so divided up by the algorithm, where if you're a right-wing Gen Z male and you talk to a left-wing female, you might as well be different civilizations because you're in different algorithms, you're in different societies. And I think the top 20% of Gen Z has the capability to be the most important generation since World War II. Because I sense a real grit and ability to do stuff among the top level of Gen Z men, but a lot of Gen Z is completely screwed. There are so many Gen Z people who basically can't leave the house. And I'm only slightly over-exaggerating.
And do you think the difference, like some people over here would say, hey, Gen Z, younger, even millennials, right? Nobody wants to work. Everyone's lazy. No one knows what it's like to be successful in that standpoint. Are you saying that there is a lot of that, but it's the people that rise to the top whatever percentage, they have the biggest ability because of the tools and technology?
So I don't like the Gen Z is lazy discourse because I think a lot of Gen Z were workaholics. When I went to school, I knew people who would do some variety of school for 12 hours a day. They'd go to class for 8 hours, they'd do an extracurricular, then they'd do hours of homework and that stuff. And so a lot of Gen Z got completely burned out when they were young. And I don't think it's fair to call people lazy if they have no incentive to work. I mean, money's not shit. If you're making 7 hours a day and an appetizer is $15, what's the point? And so I wish older generations had, because Gen Z has 90% less spending power than the boomers did in their 20s. So,
90%?
Yes.
Wow.
And so there's just, and you're not going to buy a house, you're not going to get a family, you're not going to do most of those things if you're Gen Z. And so what's the point of working? And the older generations just think, you should work because I said so. And there's this profound myopia and inability to understand that we do not live in the post-World War II era. Anything that deviates from the time period the boomers grew up in, they will vociferously deny, even if you give them statistics for every single part of it. And when the boomers were growing up, their their grandparents didn't say, you need to act like it's pre-World War I now. Because in the time scale, that would be as absurd as saying we need to be like the post-World War II period.
Wow. What do you think is the biggest misconception between, let's say, boomers, Gen X, like millennials, Gen Z?
Oh, I get a shit on every generation. Great. So, the boomers, they are civilizational cancer. The boomers are just, they're a solution you drop into the society that causes discord. And there are many wonderful boomers out there, and I have many boomer friends, but on a sociological basis, not irrespective of whoever is listening. The boomers have done a tremendous amount of damage, and they've held on to power for decades, and the millennials got screwed over by the boomers. The millennials are in their 40s, and the boomers are still holding on to everything. So the boomers don't get any of this because they haven't had enough framework of suffering to understand that they had a really good time when they were growing up. They just don't have a frame of comparison. The millennials, they're in this kind of weird spot where things were bad enough that they weren't able to achieve the success of the boomers, but things also weren't good enough that they had to be tough. And so I see the millennials stuck in, and young millennials are different from old millennials. Young millennials will often be more on board with a lot of the younger stuff, and then older millennials will often side with Gen X. I need to talk about Gen X. So the millennials are stuck in this awkward place where they've been waiting for decades to be able to have full adulthood, and it's been denied to them by the boomers. Gen X is in a weird spot where they are vastly more cynical than the boomers. I find Gen X...
Cynical?
Yeah, they're cynical. They're less trusting of the system, but they were offered enough that they didn't have to actually... I find Gen X tends to believe in the system as much as the boomers in certain ways, where Gen X will, they'll believe in a lot of the blue-pilled lies. It's just on a personal basis. They'll be more cynical about the system not being amazing. That's a difficult point for me to explain. I can articulate further if you'd like. And then for Gen Z, when the pressure is building up, the top rank of Gen Z, I think, will be capable of rising to the challenge, but a lot of these people they're not functional, I think, in a lot of cases due to helicopter parenting, where I think helicopter parenting did a huge damage to Gen Z on top of the lack of opportunity.
What do you think for, like, let's say a young Gen Z, let's talk about young men for a second, because that's us, right? What do you think is some of the biggest gaps right now? So, like, there's obviously a lot of opportunity. What do you think some of, like, the skill gaps are, from your perspective, that we should be, as a whole, training on, learning as young men, seeking, success in any category of life?
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of opportunity, but there will be in the future. So what I tell guys, if you're not in a good place now, just hang in there till things get better, because when you're young, you have a lot of time. But one of the things my dad said to me is, Rudyard, just accumulate as many skills as possible, and at some point someone will pay you for one. He said, we live in a capitalist system based off skills, so get as many skills as possible. Because I did not do well in school. I barely passed high school and middle school. So I was stressing about grades, and my
Hold up. You barely passed that? You're like a walking history book. I honestly am feeling like I feel like I can, like, ask a question to you, and it's like you have more information than AI will spit back.
You.
I get better at prompting.
I am a level 12 battle mage.
So I didn't mean to interrupt your story, but like
Walter agrees.
How did you? So it just didn't come easy to you? Like is this a recent thing that you have so much research? I
was still into reading back then. Just school was not designed for my strengths, where people would say, I'm not good at punctuation, I'm not good at picking the formats they choose, following instructions, and school was mostly about following instructions. If you followed the instructions, you'd get an A, and if you didn't, you wouldn't. So, so that's why I didn't do great in school. I mean, a lot of this has come to a surprise to me. I never thought this would turn out to be my life. It's a weird plot change.
Meaning the success on the YouTube channel.
Yeah. I didn't. I was worried I'd work a minimum wage job when I was in high school, and. Yeah, it's just it hit me like a flood around COVID, because I was stuck at home during COVID. I just worked on the channel, and it took off by the end of 2020.
That's insane.
It is, yeah. I'm grateful though. There are worse fates.
So you said build as many skills as possible. Then you talk about the education system. What do you think about modern education, the way we have it now, versus the way education's been done for many centuries? I'm sure you have some opinions on this. I'll give you mine really quick. I think that it's people say it's a social experiment. Like, we homeschool our kids. We have 4 little kids. We homeschool our kids because I feel like the primary educator of the child should be the parent.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's an interesting thing to give your kids over to another institution to train them from the time they're little to the time on how to think and how to learn. But I also realize that it's difficult because not everybody has the experience that I do in life and has a wife that wants to stay home and do that. So I guess all that being said, what are some of the differences between education has been forever and how education is now?
So you're married with 4 kids?
Yeah.
Huh, that's impressive.
Oh, thank you. There are 4 little ones, 7 and under, so
Yeah.
it's a busy household.
Yeah. So if you get rid of the public school system, you've effectively strangled the social power of the left. Because the left gets its power because as the state educates the public will grow up to believe the state is their god, which is what happened. Where leftist philosophy is all predicated upon the state being able to control reality. They think the state can get rid of biology. They think the state can get rid of the laws of nature. Leftist philosophy, at its core, and this is something they say too, is the idea that mankind can control reality, which is nuts. It's just that's stupid, and it's self-evidently stupid.
Like my opinions of reality actually change reality.
Yes, that's what they think.
That's the concept.
They think if you can define a term, you can change it. And so that's why the left has a stranglehold on our social code. At least it's a big part that they had a monopoly on the raising of the children. And that's something that for the rest of history, people would draw profound suspicion from, because we got naive due to the enormous wealth of the Industrial Revolution and the enormous gains we made. And so we didn't think about the end point of this, but you would see the left wiped out, but you'd also see family and social class take on a different predominance. Because for most of history, until 200 years ago, you didn't have schools. The parents raised kids, but then as the parents controlled the social code, it meant that for a nobleman, you could know that a nobleman's son could perform the role of said nobleman because he was trained in that way of life. Without the public school system, suddenly your social class and your family upbringing matters a lot more, which is why history was the way it was. And it's why in the Bible they'll have these lengthy segments of saying Samuel beget Moses.
Oh, the lineage
exactly.
of the family, of the names.
Yeah, it's why I'll have 10 names. I'm going to say this so I don't forget. One of my good friends is from Montana, and he's got a similar accent to you. And I placed it as a Southern accent first, because it kind of got a drawl to it. And then he said he's from Montana, and and I thought, oh, it's a cowboy accent.
It's a country thing.
Yeah.
I actually get that a lot. It's funny because it's funny how your worldview, I'm like, oh yeah, you go to the South, I have a friend in Mississippi, really great people, and they talk very different, right? Very Southern drawl, very drawn out words. And they're like, no, you're the one that has an accent. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. No.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So what are the different, so I'm kind of curious, I don't know if you have an extensive knowledge on this or not, but I'm going to guess you probably do. When it comes to different models of education, has it been up until now pretty much just like what you said, like is it pretty much all the same, or is different periods of history there's been vastly different ways of educating children? Like has it always been just basically mom and dad educate the child, or has there been different variations of schools and academies and things like that?
Depends on social class. So for most people in history, you just worked with your parents. So your parents were farmers, so you farmed with your parents. And then you picked up the skills through that. For the upper classes, you would hire tutors. And the upper class education is what we call the liberal arts. So it's logic, grammar, all those rhetoric, all those different things, where the goal of the liberal arts was to create someone who could have wisdom and discernment. That's why they kept on focusing on ways to think about the world. Then you'd read the classics. And so most historic societies, religion and education were inextricably linked, as well as the classics. So most societies, you read the classics of that culture in order to understand it. So in China, they would read Confucius and their religious documents. In India, they'd read the Mahabharata and their cultural documents. And in the West, they'd read the Greeks and the Romans. They'd read the medieval epics. They'd read the Bible. So in each civilization, you develop these cultural canons or these cultural sources of information that could be used as this sort of bedrock of wisdom, that you could study them and then figure out how the world worked. And in modernity, we lost the nuance there, where we thought we're just going to shove people information of differing levels of usefulness at them, and they're going to remember it and regurgitate it.
What do you think the solution is? I mean, some people would argue to this point is like, okay, I can say I think homeschool and the tutor model and all that, apprentice model, all those things are maybe better than a public school system. There's other people that might say, well, then what do you do with those kids all day? Like, what are they just if they're not of a certain status, are they just basically screwed?
They'll work. I mean, that's what you're positing. If you've got rid of public school, if you get rid of public school, either you have to accept child labor or you'll have community schooling. So a new modern equivalent is you get rid of the public school system, but in exchange you establish, and this has been a conservative policy for decades, it hasn't been passed, you establish a system through which parents have vouchers to send their kids to any school, and then schools develop free range, and they establish, let's say you want to form a school. Mm-hmm. You get the school permit, you hire teachers, you run it as a business, then you want to make a franchise. So if you remove the teachers union, remove the state's enforcement of school systems, you could just give parents vouchers to choose which school in the local area they want to send their kids to. Then you'd open the school system up to competition.
Do you think there's any role... Do you think the government should have any hand in what curriculum is being taught to children?
No.
Easy enough.
I mean, it's one of those things where you think...
Me either, by the way. I do agree with you.
I guess from the context.
What could ever give that away?
The other thing as well is that... So, teachers, schools... Oh, yeah, so... Whenever people think about the government, they think about accomplishing their goal, and they don't think about the costs required to do that. And then you think, are the costs equivalent to the thing you're getting? And in a lot of cases, it's no. As Thomas Sowell said, communism is a good idea compared to what, at what cost, and with what evidence.
Very interesting. So if you were in charge today, let's just say you have complete authority to do whatever you want, what would you do? Let's say you're the president. What would and you had the ability to do it. Let's say you're the king. What would you say? What was your next couple steps?
If I had total power, my number one thing would be to increase quality of life for the average American, because I think the average American exists in a state of what's poverty. And so if you don't increase quality of life, we're going to have... My big thesis is that America's on the verge of a civil war. So I think if we can't improve average quality of life, we're on the verge of a civil war. And I think we're still past the threshold. I don't think we can stop it, but... The way you increase quality of life is you increase the valuation of labor. So you do that. I would expel immigrants. I would establish tariffs. I would deregulate the economy. I would. I think we need to make some legal protections around AI. I don't know where the good line is, though. So I would do everything possible so that the value of each individual American worker is as much as possible.
Why do you think there's going to be a civil war? Show me the theory on that.
So,
over what?
Right and left. This is something I've been on a dozen podcasts to talk about, so I'm just going through my pre-programmed response. I study about 5... I can give you the intuitive answer and the analytic answer. The analytic answer is I've studied like 5 different historic statistical models that predict we're going to have a civil war now. So... there's the one David Hackett Fisher, Peter Turchin, Goldstein, there's a few others, Strauss and Howe. They all have these models from the 20th century that predict America will have a civil war or a major war in the 2020s. This is a consistent pattern. The best of these models operates under economic data, where he predicts when societies have civil wars or revolutions in a dozen different places. So he predicts French Revolution, fall of the Roman Republic, fall of the Roman Empire, English Civil War, Black Death, and a bunch of others. So he's got this statistical model, and in 2010, the model so that in the mid-2020s, America will have a civil war. And so he wrote that 15 years ago, and it's aged super well, and the intuitive answer is I don't know how this is going to end, except in violence, where look at the news every single day. Do people look like they're going to back down, or does they look like they're going to ramp up and keep going till they slam into a brick wall?
Like on their varying viewpoints on a lot of different issues, social, economic, you name it.
Yeah.
Right?
So Look at the Tesla. I mean, I've followed. One of the great parts of my job is I made a bet with Tim Pool, I made a bet with Andrew Heaton, which I since lost, that there would be 1,000 politically motivated deaths by April. And because of that bet, whenever I open my social media, someone tags my name whenever there's a politically motivated murder. So every day I check my phone, new politically motivated murder on the list. It's a great incentive to use social media less.
Not everybody can say that, Rudyard. That's very unique.
So, I mean, the other people who can say they open their phone to politically motivated murderers, they're people that like people the FBI are investigating. But so politically motivated murders, they're skyrocketing, and especially the case with Tesla has been horrifying, where Elon Musk has become a big attack of the left lately because they're going after him. And thank you for the shout outs, by the way, from Elon. He shouted me out a few times in the last few months. The politically motivated attacks, I believe, are targeting Elon because the left has been targeting Trump for 8 years.
Right.
And they're running out of energy. So I think they can use Elon as the wealthiest man in the world as a way to pool their followers' energy off envy. Because they can dislike that he's the wealthiest man in the world and say that he's destroying the environment, although he was their hero until recently. And I just find it insane. The left, did you hear about how the left literally put up these websites showing every Tesla owner in the country so you can murder and vandalize them?
What?
And Reddit literally doxed the addresses and names of the people in the Doge program in order to murder them. And Reddit openly talks about storming the Capitol, attacking Trump, all of these things. Public leftist websites. Left-wing think tanks have shadowboxed launching a coup already. So this is something where, and they call everything the left says is projection. So when they talk about Trump and Elon launching a coup, they're projecting their own psyche. And so they can say to their own followers, look, the right is launching a coup. We need to launch a coup in order to balance this out. And so the point I'm trying to say here is that with the Tesla murders, it shows the left's completely deranged and they want blood, because I don't even think Tesla owners are mostly conservative. Tesla's not conservative coded. It's environmentalist coded, which is a lot of leftists. And they're using this as an excuse for blood. And I think things are too heated now that there's not an off-ramp anymore.
What do you think? So it leads, all these things leads to civil war. Let's just assume for today's argument that happens. What does it look like? Obviously, it's a projection, but what do you think that actually looks like? Is that small town America? Let's just use like small town America, or sitting in this city, whatever. What does that physically look like?
The right would win. Because the right has an advantage in military support, gun owners, draft age young men. The right has a single geographic coherent territory where the left can only really hold the coasts. The right has all the food, all the oil, all the resources. So I think the right would win. I think the only reason the left would start a war like that is delusion, which of course is outside their character traits. And with the right would win. The right doesn't have a coherent ideology or a coherent elite structure, where if the right won, it would kind of be a mess trying to figure out how to govern without the left.
What is that structure though? Like, I'm curious in your opinion. Is it, is it two different governments forming? And we're talking about some military support on both sides.
Yes.
Is it, random bad example, but you have Navy SEALs and Marines on, some go this way, some go that way. It's brother against brother, father against son, that kind of stuff.
It's not a bad example. It's reasonable as history goes. So my top scenario, and I have a series of things that could start this war. I thought it was the election because the right and the left had disputed the last two elections already. So I assume they dispute this one, but apparently Trump won so much the left couldn't get away with it. then besides the election, it's a budget issue. And our budget is unsalvageable. It will never be paid. It's just our budget. Our budget deficit is enormous, and we have no interest in fixing it. So the budget issue is going to keep being a problem until it blows up by itself. So my best scenario for what would start a war, and this is a precedent from previous crises like this, such as the English Civil War, the French Wars of Religion, the French Revolution, is that in each of these conflicts, a budget issue between two political factions spirals into a civil war because neither side is willing to make concessions for a stable budget, where it's like a failed marriage. If you're in a failed marriage and then your wife's mom is dying and needs an expensive medical treatment that will eat into your savings, the husband might just be like, screw it, I never liked her anyway, divorce. That's kind of what happens in conflicts like this, where there's a huge budget issue. Then two factions, they can't agree on how to cut up the budget. And so that's what spawns a war. And let's say there's the American People's Government based out of New York or DC. There's the American Patriots Government based out of Austin, Texas. Both of them will claim to be the one true American government, while they claim that the other side are rebels, which gives both sides perfect legal justification to do whatever they want, because they're the only legal actor. The military would mostly go right, while most of America's allies would support the left, but I still stand by the right would win. I used to put right-wing victories chances at 85%. Now it's higher, because the right has the legal... Due to Trump winning the election, the right has the legal, they're in the right. And so anything the left does from this point will be highly illegal, which means the right can probably scoop up a lot of the military and different factions because they'll say that they're in the legal right.
When do you predict this happens?
So I got my last prediction wrong. Last April, I predicted it would occur within the next year, and it hasn't. I'm going to say next 4 years. I don't think we'll get to the next 4 years without a war.
What do people, let's say let's say somebody agrees with that, somebody disagrees with that. If somebody agrees with that and they think, yeah, I think, Rudyard, I think this is going to, be as you say, then what would somebody, just an average person, what would they do to prepare for that?
Get guns and a month of food and water. If you're not a particularly patriotic guy, you could leave, although I would not condone that. And I mean, the thing with wars as well is that, and this is one of the things I've said before, that people seem to think that in a war, it's just the zombie apocalypse. Everything falls apart. In reality, you'll still have to take care of your kids. You'll still go to work. You'll still pay rent. You'll still watch stuff on Netflix. If you go to Ukraine or Syria or one of those countries, I haven't, but this is what I've heard, you'll be shocked at how normal most people's lives are outside the war zones. Because America is going to be probably, unless, let's say, the Republicans are purposely besieging New York and cutting off the food supply, it's pretty hard to starve in America because we're the world's biggest food exporter. And even if for some reason our supply chains were cut down, we would just buy food from the rest of the world since we're so wealthy. So I think it's genuinely hard to have people starve in America.
What do you think about, I mean, not to change gears, that's kind of got my brain going. What do you think about the impact of the technology side? So we're kind of talking about, this is not the direction I thought we were going to go today, which is cool, but I love this. What do you think about AI, where it's going? Are you saying AI, robots, they already exist, they're going to make billions of them, we have big problems with that? Or are you on the team that says, you know what, there's some dangers, but I think that overall AI and the robots even that they're making, billions of them, I think that that's all going to be fine, and it's actually just going to increase productivity, and the rest of time we're going to have these robots that take care of us and make life easier. What are you on one side or the other, or somewhere in the middle?
So I refuse to have an opinion on AI because I've gotten to the other side of the Dunning-Kruger in the humanities, and I haven't in science. And I know how difficult it is to get the correct answer, and I haven't studied AI or tech enough. in order to have an opinion that's educated enough for me worth the share. Because I know lots of people in tech who have spent thousands of hours on AI, and so I'll listen to the things that they say, and then I'll take that as like the best answer I'm going to get soon. The thing with AI is that there's two huge disturbances that come from it. The first is that a conservative government could completely cut out the managerial class with AI. So the left's power comes from the managerial class, the bureaucracy. If you study the demographics,
like middle-level manager type positions that are supervisory but not actually doing the physical work.
Leftism's correlated very heavily with lack of agency. So high agency work, even if you're poor, like small business owners or farmers, tend to be right-wing. Low agency work, like mid-level managers, as you say, or teachers or retail workers, they tend to go left, because leftism is them. It's basically a power fantasy. It's we're going to totally rearrange the world and have complete control over everything. And so what the Unabomber said is that leftism is an outgrowth of that. And so with I'm sorry, what was the question?
I kind of got you, I kind of keep going off different tangents, but kind of around the AI.
Yeah. So practically every single job you could give to someone in the managerial class, you could automate with AI. So a conservative government could completely get rid of the federal bureaucracy and then just put an AI to replace it. You could get rid of mid-level management at your company and use AI to replace it, because the exact kind of jobs AI gets rid of the easiest are the paper shuffling jobs.
Data, compiling data, reports, following up on, managerial level tasks.
Yeah. And this creates a huge gap, because there's going to be a lot of people who are not employable due to AI. There's going to be lots of people who are actually quite high status who, for example, lots of doctors could get wiped out due to AI, because they need years of training in order to get the skills that an AI could just look at someone's body language and assess what their medical state is. So lots of high-level jobs will be automated out by AI, and I think that's going to cause political disturbances, because I'm from the Rust Belt, and it was shocking growing up how the elites and the society backstabbed my entire region of 100 million people, and there was zero self-reflection about it. No one talked at the Rust Belt for decades. So you can screw over working class people, but then once the white collar people get screwed over, it's a political catastrophe. So there's going to be something around that.
That is fascinating.
It's why I think the left, in a lot of cases, is decel on AI, because they know that AI is going to replace what they do.
Where does that leave you? So, like, if you are somebody looking to go into the job market, let's say you're a young person, or maybe you're somebody, advanced in years, but you're deciding to, like, hey, I want to protect myself against this. I'm going to take action against this idea. What do you feel are like some AI proof? I know you said we don't want to speak as the authority on it, but just like, your general opinion. What are some like more AI proof industries or professions versus some that are going to be wiped out almost no matter what?
Statistically, the most AI proof industry is being an archaeologist, because it's no money, out with highly obscure knowledge in the desert. So archaeology statistically is the last job to be replaced by AI. And probably the one most likely to get rid of AI is the last travel attendant in the country. But
I've asked this question a whole bunch of times, Rudyard, and I've never got even close as good an answer as that.
Thank you.
That's the most entertaining answer for sure.
But
you're so damn funny. That's why this is such a fun conversation.
I am honored. Walter agrees. So, be a craftsman. I mean, I think that one of the potential solutions of AI, one of the better options, is people return to the land. And there's a lot of bad things to it being a pre-industrial farmer, but at least it's a job that's relatively closer to human nature. If you spend all day in the field or those things, at least you're with your family. At least you're. It's hard for me to glorify this lifestyle, but at least it's work where you're doing stuff with your hands that humans evolved for. Because humans in office jobs have significantly higher levels of dissatisfaction, although they're easier work. And so I think what might happen is that humans re-ruralize, and then we build communities outside the cities, because cities can't reproduce. No urban society in history is replicable, even in the ancient or medieval world. So what happened when we became a 90% rural? We moved from a 90% rural to a 90% urban society over the course of the Industrial Revolution, and with that, the world's population is not sustainable, which is why it's crashing to nothing now. The scariest thing today is the birth rate. And I love to talk about that more in the future. But the only way to fix that is you need only rural populations are replicable. So people will have to move from the countryside, from the cities to the countryside, and those people will have children. And it's a consistent pattern. So that's going to be a demographic shift that occurs. And I wonder if a lot of the managerial city jobs will be AI'd out, which will help move this demographic transition.
What happens to these cities? Just like apocalyptic type scenes where there's abandoned buildings everywhere?
So I'm from Philly, and I already saw this. Half of Philly's practically uninhabitable now. It's just, and it's crazy if you're from a different part of the country, because I talk to Texans, and Texans have no concept that what happened in Pennsylvania can happen. Like I was talking to a Texan friend who's Gen Z, and I said every single year there were less people in my classroom. And that just shocked him, because in Texas, they'll build an entire town in the last 20 years from scratch. That's how fast Texas is growing. What happened in the Rust Belt is that I once told my mom and my sister I would bike through a 2-block bad area of Philly, and they literally burst into tears in front of me, because that's how bad the reputation for West Philly is. And it
just danger. I mean, just
oh yeah, it's like if you tell
crime.
someone I'm going to go to North Philly and you're from Philly, someone will literally freak out, like especially if they're more neurotic. There's just certain large parts of Philly you just don't go to, and so it wouldn't surprise me if we re-ruralize, if you'll see these ruined older cities where people live in the center or the old historic core. But that's how the Dark Ages were. Rome's population took over 1,000 years to reach what it was under the Empire, after the Empire fell.
No way.
Yeah. In the year 1000, Rome had vastly less people than it did in the year 300. And that's not abnormal. The area where the Maya civilization is based now has half the population did 1,000 years ago.
Half?
Yes.
As 1,000 years ago.
They never recovered. The Yucatan was all cut down it's all the trees cut down 1,000 years ago. Now the Yucatan's all jungle.
I think it's interesting to talk about history, like the different things over the centuries. Is like, as a young American with a lot of American pride, I grew up with a worldview that says that's what exists. Is like, I'm pro USA, Star Spangled Banner. That's what exists to me. And like, to think about like the founding fathers, that was so long ago. In history, that's a baby.
Yeah.
Like in history, that's like not even like I went to Italy when I was in high school. And have you been to Italy?
Yeah, I have.
So I went to Italy. We went through Rome and all over the place for 2 weeks on this kind of pilgrimage type thing, right? And we're going through all these churches. And, so the tour guide said something to the effect of, that's a pretty new, that's a new building, more of a modern building. And that's a really old one. I was like, well, what does new mean? Like, how old are we talking? I'm thinking like new to me as an American young man is like, oh, it's like a 10-year-old thing. She said new, and it was 400 years old.
Yeah.
Like referencing, well, that building over there is 2,000 years old. That building, whatever, right? That building over here is like brand new, 300 years old. That's older than our entire freaking country.
Yeah, I went to Italy with my best friend and my business manager, and he's from Boston. We went to one church the day we arrived when we were waiting for our hotel to get ready. And he said this one random church we stumbled on in Italy, he said it's more beautiful than all Massachusetts combined. And
there's just so much deep history there.
Yeah, there is. And it's funny, Europe's young compared to Asia. Asia's got another few thousand years on Europe. And in Texas, the 70s, if the house is built in the 70s, it's recent. And in Pennsylvania, that's unbelievably young. And so this is just one of how the world works. And one of my favorite examples of this is that 1,000 years ago, the Muslim world was the most technologically advanced, scientifically, philosophically, advanced society in the world and the most feminist place in the world. Then the Muslim world experienced their own dark age 1,000 years ago, which they never recovered from. So when you're looking at Islam today, you're seeing the end point of their own dark age, where when we think Muslims, we think hijabs, we think religious intolerance, we think backwardness. But 1,000 years ago, it was the exact opposite. And this was a dark age and a historic event that completely changed history that no one knows about.
What started that whole period?
So the Prophet Muhammad founded the Arab world, and then it became a unified empire under the Umayyad, followed by the Abbasid Caliphate. With the fall of the Abbasid Caliphate in the 9th century, the Muslim world experienced all of the civilizational collapse things that normally happen when empires die. And this is one of the scary things, if you know history, that we're experiencing them. Declining birth rate, moral degeneracy, feminism, immigration from other societies, lack of interest in service in the military, higher class stratification, breakdown of shared values, breakdown of religion. These happen in every falling empire because it's human nature. And so we're experiencing the other variables as the many empires, including the Muslim empires, fell with. So the Muslim world experienced barbarian invasions from the Turks. They experienced civil wars. They had anarchist communist rebels in Azerbaijan, and they had a black nationalist revolt in Iraq. So all of these things that we would think of in the 20th century were in the Muslim world 1,000 years ago.
So you speak about like the decline of like masculinity and the rise of, feminism. That's been a very key topic in a lot of the things that you've said. What do you do? Like as a young man, like what are the traits of masculinity? That's my question. What are the traits of masculinity? Like in your opinion, and how does one strive to be more like that?
Masculinity is getting what you want. And I don't like the current paradigm of masculinity, which is just get really jacked, hang with a lot of hot girls on Instagram, and go to Dubai. And that model of masculinity is popular now, but I think as more white men try to enact it, they will realize that it's not really what they want. And so I think we're going to end up in a transition I don't want to fully dunk on the red pill, because I think for the red pill and that entire axis of masculinity, it's done more good than it's done bad. So I think because it got guys to start trying to go to the gym and work harder and those things. So I'm not gonna completely dunk on it, but my hope is that we develop a deeper concept of masculinity. And most people say that they mean something that's fundamentally weak, but I don't mean it that way, where it should pull on our earlier ideals of masculinity. Like, I like to say that if someone like Charlemagne or Napoleon isn't your concept of masculinity, then you're not reaching the full scale of things. Because if you're a successful Instagram influencer, that's nothing compared to Napoleon. And so and my question for a lot of these guys is, what do you actually want? Because lots of people are hedonistic because they have nothing better to do. They don't actually want to do it. It's what people tell them they should want, but they don't actually want it. And so
meaning a constant desire for more in a financial sense, in a wealth sense, in a flashy, showy, status improving sense.
No one's ever happy when they go to the club. People go to the club, at least in my experience. I'm sure there are people who do like the club. People go to the club because they think other people like it. And so you'll end up with these social behaviors. There are people do things because they think other people think it's cool. I think this is social media too. And so once you pull back the layer, is this actually what you want? And for most people, the things they actually want are relatively attainable.
What do you think, like, most people actually want? I'm fascinated by this concept, and I think everyone would have a different answer, but what do you think people really want, but maybe don't understand that that's what they want?
I think most people are effectively normies. And for normies, the average human needs work, meaning, and mate. That's what Sigmund Freud said. And so I think young men in our society no work, no mate, no meaning. So that's why there's so much young male dissatisfaction. And people say that compared to, I don't know, a starving peasant 500 years ago, young people today don't have it that bad. But I'm not a pure materialist. I don't think human life is built off how many Cheetos you have in your freezer. I think it's deeper things like honor or pride or God or whatever. And we've failed in those categories. And the basics of that normal humans could have expected 50 years ago, most young people don't have. And so for most people, get those three down: meaning, mate, work. I need to find an M word for work to have a triple M. And then you have people who are not normies and they need to attain their destiny. And your destiny is dependent on who you are as a person. You have to figure it out yourself. And it could be, I don't know, you want to backpack across China. You want to become the biggest expert on armadillos.
What do you want, Rudyard? What do you want?
I'm tired of our current paradigm. I'm tired of the current reality we inhabit, and I want to rearrange it to something healthier.
Like you want to be a piece of that impact.
Yeah, I want to be a piece of getting rid of the current leftist order and just healing society, because I think we're an incredibly sick society and I want to help heal it.
That's pretty noble.
Thanks.
I don't think that's something that we talk about very often is, and you said it, is like, how often do we sit around as young men talking about honor, talking about virtue? Do you know how many people have been talking about virtue for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden now, that's just kind of like a weak thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Virtue, honor, God, those types of subjects used to be the main thing that society would talk about. Those are the socially acceptable things to talk about. Now is the inverse. Yeah,
you get judged for talking about them. And because the left used our moral code against us, any appeal to higher morality is hated, because you have to get through the filter of the left not shaming you. So we've seen, I think nihilism is the worst part of it, because you've seen nihilism on both the right or the left, where appeals, one of my friends likes to say, you can get people to believe anything as long as it's ridiculous.
There's a lot of truth in that. So you mentioned a minute ago, and it struck me, you mentioned about like the social media, the comparison game. You might not even want that, but you do things because you want to basically keep up with the Joneses. You want to be, what kind of effect do you think the social media, and I don't mean like social media 10 years ago. There's a huge difference between social media today and doom scrolling, the type of content we have now, versus social media when it was, 10 years ago. I think there's a vast difference. What do you see the effects are? Good and bad, or if there are some on both sides of that.
It's incredibly toxic, especially for young women. I think social media has had a really negative impact on people's psychology. I think it might have long-term positive historic effects, but I think as of now, it's been really bad because...
net positive? You think long-term net positive, or just there are some, but there to be...
Centuries from now, people might look back on social media to say this was a thing that allowed social organization independent from the state. That's what I'm saying. Where I think the internet in the long term, people might look back on it saying the internet was a great move for freedom because it allowed social organization independent from governments. But as of now, I think also it allows greater ability for people to meet each other. None of us would have met without the internet.
That's true.
If you look at social networks, people are meeting through the internet now. So it allows accumulation of certain traits that would otherwise not exist without it. But I think especially for young women, the effects are horrible, because you look at young women and their entire psyche is based around social media addiction. Everything they do for lots of young women is spending the time on Instagram, trying to increase their subscriber count versus their friends. And when all is said and done, nothing has been accomplished. This is just it's a social sink. And it also brings out the worst traits in people. Because whenever I go online, I feel worse about life than when I went there. I try to think to
Wow.
myself, when I pull up social media, do I feel better or worse? And unilaterally, I feel worse.
That deserves just some silence. Like seriously, I mean, I think there's a friend of mine that would always watch these horror movies. I personally don't like them, and he was like, well, "Why not? Suspense and all this." And I go, I don't want to. Like, my rule for a movie is if I feel worse about life when I'm done watching the movie, then it's a bad movie.
Yeah.
If I feel better about life or more inspired or excited to go tackle the next thing when I'm done with the movie, I think that, and you just said about social media, I think that you're spot on. So do you think people should limit their social media time? Do you think they should get rid of it altogether? Sometimes I get very, like the idea is romantic of not even having a phone, not even having social, but we both make a pretty decent amount of our living using that as a tool for our business. And I think there's some net positives of it as well. So like, what do you do about it? Do you limit it?
It's fundamentally not a good situation. One of the points I like to tell people is that people, especially young people, are very self-critical. And what I say is most of the issue is not you, it's the world you live in. If these people were born in 1955, exact same person, they'd probably be doing a way better. The problem is that you probably shouldn't or can get rid of your phone, especially for certain ages and certain careers, where you'll get cut out of most of human life. Because I think even most business occurs on the internet now. You won't be able to scan the QR codes at restaurants, all that stuff. And I think people should limit their social media usage as much as possible, but the issue is that people don't really have something to replace it with. It's an ecosystem issue where if you want to get rid of an addiction, you have to replace the addiction with something else. The issue with most alcoholics is when they stop drinking, drinking has consumed their entire life up to that point. So they hang out with their friends by drinking. When they're bored, they drink. When they're sad, they drink. So they have to reorganize what else are they going to do at that time. And that's the real social issue with most people with social media, where for me, I can read, I can do other stuff, I can walk around. But for most people, I don't know what they do besides social media because the social networks broke down. Zoomers don't really go to third places. So for a lot of people, I would tell you, try to limit it as much as possible, but understand if you can't. And we really need some kind of social movement with this. We need some kind of social institutions of don't get addicted to your phone because like a lot of young people spend 7 hours a day besides work on their phones. And that's just giving up your life. Yeah. That's everything. That's all your time. And so we need to fix the screen issue soon or it's going to become a horrible addiction.
Yeah, like you said, we need AA for screens.
Yeah. I opened Instagram today.
I said I wouldn't do it, and I sat down at 9 o'clock and I doom scrolled till 11.
Yeah.
I think, and you said it. When do you leave your social media time or scrolling time? When do you leave that, sit down for an hour? When do you leave that moment feeling better? Almost never. It's usually a net negative on your day. My best theory so far, and I'm asking the question because I actually really value your opinion, and I'm trying to figure this out. And I want other people that are smart to help me figure this out. For me and for everybody else is like, here's where I'm at currently. I think that using it at work and defined work hours, whatever that may be for each person, let's just say 9 to 5 for the average human, the phone, the screens, even social media can be a very good tool. And it certainly has helped me. It certainly helped you and anybody else, that's probably listening to this. But I have yet to find it be a good thing or a net positive to my life outside of my work hours.
Yeah.
It's the kid going, daddy, 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 pulling on my shirt for 15 seconds, like daddy, 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 before I realized that, I was like, texting somebody back and I didn't mean to ignore them, but I did.
Yeah.
It's the, you just watch people in their cars. Next time you go to a stoplight, look around the 10 cars and notice that every freaking person that is driving cars on the road is at their stoplight scrolling on their phone. It's insane. People walking to and from the bathroom in a hotel or in a work setting are on their phones. Everywhere that there is dead silence, we have now reverted to, I don't have to think, I don't have to be, I can just consume.
Yeah. The problem as well is that people like to say that I say a lot of bad things about society, and people will say, go outside. They'll say, touch grass. But touching grass is what got me to be cynical about society. And I like to say that people look at their phones because if they looked at anything else, they'd have an existential crisis. It shocks me that people in blue cities will say that everything is fine and the regime they serve is fine. And there's a friggin' homeless guy, like, screaming and shaking down the street. And it's just, the streets are covered in filth. And if you're not looking at your phone, you have to think about just the things that aren't working in your daily life. And it's really funny where I think that I think for most people, they have 3 good YouTube channels they watch they actually derive some positive stuff from. Then the rest of YouTube's got some good content. I used to see better content on Twitter, but it's declined in the last few years, or it declined in the last year. I don't see much of value on Instagram or a lot of the other social medias. And so there is good content, but it's weighed down by an infinite morass of just like, you know, when you look at a pond and the pond's filled with algae because it's just the water is old, that's what's happened in social media ecosystems. Because when I look at political streamers as an example, if I hear one of their opinions, I can predict the opinions of everyone else in that industry. I can click on the next video and I'll hear the exact same opinion. It's because it's become so stultified. All of social media, if you're in a certain algorithmic ghetto, they're going to repeat the same phrases, the same ideas, those things.
Like there's no new content, there's no new thought process. It's regurgitation and repackaged a little bit.
Yeah.
From the first guy's opinion. It's the toxic I don't like this word, but I'm going to use it. It's the toxic masculinity. It's like a wrong view of masculinity going around some of these some of these Instagram reels where it's like this guy believes it, and then now 100 other content creators say the same thing.
Yeah, I think toxic masculinity is real. It's just Genghis Khan. Toxic masculinity is not... In Canada, one of the male premiers brushed another premier who they disagreed with, and this was called toxic masculinity. And I thought, if you've attained actual toxic masculinity, you would not even process that as a slight.
Right.
Like,
that word has just taken on so much false meaning at this point that, like, well, it's better. Toxic masculinity is better than no masculinity.
Yeah.
But they're both not ideal.
Which is why people love Genghis Khan, because Genghis Khan killed 40 million people, but at least he built an empire.
That's such a good perspective.
Thanks.
People actually will, that is a more acceptable thing as a man to give credit to than to be the reverse of that.
It's why guys will say, I'm a savage, I'm a beast. And can I swear here?
Yeah, you can do that.
So if you call a woman a bitch, it's unilaterally a negative. But if a man calls himself a savage or a beast, that can be positive. Because it's different gendered expectations, because men evolved to fight. And so if you harness toxic masculinity and use it to murder your enemies, that's something your community can respect. And there's not really a converse for toxic femininity.
There's so much to all this. I am just personally curious. I don't know how much time we have, but I am just personally curious. Like, what are some of your favorite stories, like from history? Like just stories that, like, for example, I am watching the series. Have you seen The House of David?
No.
On Prime. You know, it's a David and Goliath, but it's in modern cinema, format, and it just fires me up. Like, it just fired me up so much to realize that, like, I tell my kids this story every night when they go to bed, because now they're obsessed with it, and they're like, "Oh, tell me about Goliath and the Philistines and all this."
Yeah.
And it's just really fired me up in my own faith, because I'm like, if the same God that helped David, a shepherd boy basically, literally slay a giant with no sword, no shield, no armor, a freaking slingshot, hit the guy in the head, dies, now and then becomes later the king of Israel. If that is the same guy, the same God that helped him do that is the same exact God that I can be asking for help today, literally in my own life. So it has fired me up. What are some stories maybe that have really had an impact on you in all your history studies?
So there's a handful of time periods in history that it's like the authors of the story are purposely trying to write a script that no one will believe, but it actually happened. And this is another argument for the divine. There's too many deeply ironic moments in history. So one is when Attila the Hun, who was a barbarian commander who unified all of Central Europe during the era of the fall of Rome, he attacked Italy, and he was about to take Rome, and he had a discussion with the Pope where he was about to sack Rome, and then the Pope said, if you sack Rome, God will destroy you. And Attila's army was being destroyed by malaria already. So he took it as a sign from God. Attila pulled away. He didn't attack Rome. Then that night, he was going to marry the Burgundian princess, a German people he conquered, to cement his conquest of the Burgundians. Then the princess slit his throat in their sleep on their wedding night because she would rather go out as a suicide bomber than be forced to marry the man who murdered her people. And that's why the Hun Empire fell.
I did not know that. I did know, actually, one of my favorite stories is the same story about the Pope, but I did not know the ending of that story.
Yes.
That is wild.
That's one of those. We have that from multiple medieval records. It's not fully accepted by modern historians, but we've got several medieval records of the final part of that story. Another great historic. So when it's always funny to look at worlds colliding when the Spanish went to Mexico, because Cortez and his buddies, and Cortez's 500 men took on Mexico, which had 20 million people. And on the same voyage they discovered Mexico, they conquered it. So they didn't know this was a place. And within 2 years, they conquered it. And they walked out to modern Mexico City called Tenochtitlan, which would be the second largest city in Europe. It was huge. And it was this floating island. It was this floating, they built it out on stilts on a lake. And they would farm on the lake with these terraced floating farmland. And the Aztecs had a prediction that their civilization was going to die and that this was the last in the fifth cycle of their civilization. So they predicted for a while that that this was the last time their civilization would exist. And one of the really trippy things that historians can't reconcile is we think the Aztecs predicted the exact year their civilization would fall, because based off comets, where there was a certain comet that crossed the sky in their complex astrological systems. I'd be open to having that turn out to be apocryphal. But so Spanish meet the Aztec emperor, and they start playing a board game. And in the Aztec worldview, whoever wins this board game determines the survival of their entire worldview and civilization. So they start playing. Yeah. And then Cortez loses the game, but the Aztecs let him bet his cloak and his sword because he had nothing left to bet because they need to see the end result of the board game. Cortez won the board game, captured the emperor, then their civilization died. There's an extra year of war going on, but I just love that story because it's something from the European perspective. They discovered this land and conquered it. From the native perspective, this is them playing a board game of War of the Worlds, whether or not the Martians will conquer them.
Dang. And I thought Monopoly was high stakes. Like in my household, they won't even play with me because they think it's real life. See, this is an exciting story for me. I'm going to bring that back to my wife and say, see, some board games really are that high stakes.
I mean, young people can't play Monopoly anyway because real estate's too expensive.
Okay, speed round. If you could live in any historical era, which one and why?
I'd live in early America just for quality of life. I'd live in medieval Europe for the epicness. Colonial America is early America is the best time to be alive from just quality of life, social structure, freedom, whatever. Medieval Europe is just an epic time. It's the closest thing you'll get to Skyrim in the real world.
Favorite historical figure to geek out over?
Harold Hardrada. He was a Norwegian warlord of the Viking period, where at age 16 he was kicked out of the throne of Norway. He served in the private guard of the Russian emperor, then the Byzantines. He marched an army down to Jerusalem and seized Sicily. Then, as a mercenary, went back to Norway, seized control of the throne, invaded England, and then died there. I look at Harold Hardrada and I just think, how did one man 1,000 years ago do all that?
Modern trend you think historians will roast us for?
Everything. Our entire era of history. Our descendants are going to feel so much shame for this era of history. They're going to shame us a lot for just our complete myopia. They're going to shame us for focusing on celebrity bullshit while the society's dying. It's like no one talks about the birth rate. Except last year, people started talking about it. Beforehand, no one knew that our birth rate's collapsing the fastest of any era ever, faster than any computer model.
Hold up. I did not even know. I don't know the extent of that.
Oh, it's horrible. So you had a standard deviation of birth rates, and this is the statistical set, and statistical sets are normally really big. We're down here. So the birth rate's crashing faster than our fastest computer models, and we don't have a way of stopping it.
So are you saying it's the birth rate's declining faster than pretty much any other part of history?
Easily. Our birth rate is collapsing faster by a significant margin than any other era ever, although you did have periods of birth rates beneath replacement in earlier eras. They're the Romans and the Greeks. One of my favorite historians, Will Durant, I got his wall back there. He says that the thing that killed the Greeks and the Romans the most was a declining birth rate, and he was writing in the 40s.
Why do you think that is right now? What are the major factors to the decline? The decline. Why now? Why so much?
I once paid a researcher to analyze how you maintain stable birth rates, and you need a rural religious society, and we are the least rural and the least religious society.
Just people choosing not to have more kids.
So when you're operating on the social scale, it's not really individual choice. It's the incentive structure of the society. And the biggest answer is that the cost of child rearing versus the cost of not having it's too high. Where in a previous era, you know everyone in your neighborhood, you have a strong sense of values, you can arbitrate disputes with your wife. There's a community for the kids to play in. People will babysit. You just go to your job and you just have kids. You don't even think about it. Our grandparents did not think about having children because the society was built for it. You just found a girl in your town, married her, pumped out a few kids, got home from work, and there was a system that worked.
You just described my hometown.
Which is probably why you have kids.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. I'm not even trying to be funny. It is funny, but it's like I grew up in a town of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Very German descent type of town, right? And it was just like not even a question in my mind what would happen. Well, for a second there, I did think about, like, I was like open to the idea of, am I supposed to be a priest? But that's a side note. I was like, this is just what you do.
Yeah.
You find someone, you marry them young, and you have a lot of babies.
Yeah.
And I don't question that. That's just part of who I am. That's part of the culture. And it is exactly all those same things you just said. It's easy to have kids there because everybody else does. The whole structure of the miniature society there is around the idea of kids are great.
Yeah.
And they're welcome everywhere.
Huh.
There's not this idea that kids are such a burden.
Yeah.
Like you can't bring them, like weddings. I had 550 people. We fed 550 people at my wedding.
Damn.
And I'm not even a popular guy.
Damn.
You know what I'm saying? Like we just have a lot of family members, a lot of community. All the kids come.
Yeah.
It's a giant dance. It's not some club atmosphere at weddings in my hometown.
I have an anthropologist friend, the one who made the map up there. That's a map I made, but Idaho's his favorite state in the country. He said Idaho is the highest social cohesion of any state in the country, according to his metrics.
Let's go.
But next question, please.
Aliens invade tomorrow. Which historical empire handles it the best?
Us 50 years ago.
Okay, one book or movie that shaped your love for history.
Probably Lord of the Rings, actually. Because Lord of the Rings is such an epic, historic-like story. but it's because Tolkien pulled on a lot of historic influences. So if you want to learn history by starting with Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings and reading the references, not a bad way to go.
Which historical civilization would throw the best party?
Classical, the Romans. They were pretty ostentatious. They'd like serve peacock, and they invented ice cream, which they brought down the ice from the Alps. Gladiatorial games. Yeah.
One historical myth you wish everybody would stop believing.
That the Middle Ages was primitive.
And what is the most underrated historical period?
I'm going to say medieval Islam. There's more going on than people think, but no one studies it. So it's like the ratio is people thinking about it and things going on. This is a late. I collect swords. You should go to Cult of Athena, spelled with a K. You can buy these for like $200. They're good quality. They're all battle ready. This is a late Roman cavalry sword called the Spatha.
As seen in Gladiator.
This was a sword that you'd ride your horse and then you'd cut down. The Germans used it a lot when they conquered the empire. This is my oldest sword. It's a 13th century medieval sword. These are not authentic. They are replicas. It's funny they're made in India. I have a cowboy jacket that I bought in New Mexico that's made in India. I use it as a symbol for America. This is Russian cavalry saber. I cut my foot on it. This scar. So this is the sword I'd use to fight the best. It's got a good balance. 16th century backsword. I need to polish this. This one's got great balance. It's called the murder sword from its time period of history. Viking longsword. The balance on this one isn't great. It's a bit too heavy towards the pommel. It's from It's supposed to be from like a period 1,000 years ago. I like it though. Finally, and this is my one weapon that's not battle ready. This is a Celtic broadsword. It's a bit shorter. But my ancestors would use these 2,000 years ago. That's my sword collection. Oh yeah, I got a Bowie knife. I keep this on my desk too.
Legit.
Yeah.
Dang.
Legit. So of all those swords, which one conquered the most land?
That's a hard question. Probably the Russian. Probably the Russian one. The Russians conquered a lot of turf. That's what I'm going with.
It's your story. You're sticking to it.
Well, Rudyard, thanks so much for having us over to your home and to do this podcast. I can honestly say this is the most entertained I have been and just glued, edge of my seat, literally. I found myself several times where when I was supposed to talk, I was like, oh, damn, I'm supposed to say something. Because like I was just so glued and actually paying attention to what you were saying, I forgot that I have to actually talk on this thing. So anyway, thank you so much for being on the show.
I am honored. You're very kind. I've been doing this for years. And thank you for doing this podcast. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Well, you have a new friend in me, Rudyard.
Oh, thanks.